Happy New Year. I hope you're off to a great start and that the vision of your organization is just overflowing with excitement and incredible plans for the new year. While we're looking ahead to the future, we also need to check off some things from the past, from last year. There's a couple of things we have to wrap up. And staying compliant with your reporting requirements is essential to guarding the operation of your nonprofit. So year-end reporting requirements are definitely going to vary from state to state. Even local requirements can be different. And then depending on the IRS's classification of your nonprofit, there can also be some variations in reporting requirements. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So let's just start with the common reports, the most common ones. The first one is 1099s. These are informational tax returns that are filed by your nonprofit with the IRS, and they're due by January 31st. So definitely be working on these right now. These will apply to you if you have paid a contractor for services. It actually is a little bit more complicated than that. So I just want to refer you to a training on 1099s if you haven't yet completed something. There's some really good ones online for about $150. There's variations depending on what type of organization that is, or if they're sole proprietor versus a corporation, S Corp, all those things can create variations. So all that though, just to say, why are the 1099s necessary? Well, I like to just kind of practically think about it, and that the IRS is in the business of collecting tax money. And this informational return that you'll file helps them to have information about people who may owe them tax money because they've received income from you. So that's kind of the heart behind it, and there's definitely a lot of technical requirements in there. The next return that I want to talk about today is the W-2s. Those are provided to employees, and they're also filed with Social Security Administration by January 31st. Now, this is a form that summarizes annual wages paid to employees, tax amounts withheld, and there can be some additional requirements for these forms related to things like retirement plan contributions, if you have a minister who received housing allowance, and situations where you have child care reimbursements as a few examples, and there are more. Again, here, you also may need to file these things with your city or your state or local taxing authority if those are applicable to you. Now, number 3, related to the W-2 is the quarterly 941s that summarize the wages, taxes withheld, etc. That also has to be filed for the final quarter of the previous calendar year. And this is also the moment where you kind of want to pause that 941 filing and make sure that you've included all non-cash compensation. And so if you've given benefits to your employees that are taxable, but that you've not yet included in their paycheck as a non-cash item, you'll want to do that. You'll want to file the correct 941 and make sure then that's reported inside of the W-2. Okay, the 4th item is going to be the 990, or depending on income and number of years in operation, it could be a 990EZ or a short form. This is an informational tax return required by nonprofits to be filed with the IRS. But in this case, you actually have 5 months and 15 days of your year end. So if you're a calendar year end, that puts it at May 15th. And if you have a different year end, you'll have to do a little math here. I also need to mention, though, that some nonprofits are exempt from filing a 990. To know whether that applies to you, you'll find that on your IRS determination letter with your tax ID number and your nonprofit code section that you're exempt under. Inside of that form, it'll say whether or not the 990 has to be filed or if you're exempt. Okay, number 5, state filings. These vary by state and run the whole gamut. But typically they fall in a couple of areas, whether or not your state requires a charitable solicitation or a fundraising report for anybody raising money in the state. Also, it can be that your state requires annual filing to confirm your exempt status. Maybe they require that you submit your financial reports annually, or just some type of corporate document to renew your existence each year. Very state by state, totally depends on where you're at. just be aware of this and definitely check with a local CPA. Also, on a side note here, some states require you to file them even if you're not operating in their state, but you're soliciting funds in their state. This gets really complicated when we get into kind of the fundraising efforts that go nationally or internationally. So you'll want to be careful here and make sure you're filing what's required based on how you're operating. Number 6 is giving statements. These are required by the IRS. There's a publication 1771 that I'll link to in the blog post that's all about substantiating charitable gifts from donors. And it outlines all of those requirements. And once again, these are due January 31st. Of the year following the donation. So if the donation was last year, you have till this year's January 31st to get it filed. Now, these are a great and fun reporting requirement because you can include with them communication with your donors, appreciating them, sharing with them some of the wins that you've had, or even casting vision for what's up ahead and how you welcome and appreciate their support. So that's a really fun one. It actually gives you an opportunity to get back into that forward-looking energy that I hope you started this new year with. Okay, so I'm curious, you may have some funny things I've never heard of or some reports that you're required to file, and I'd love to learn more about that. You can engage with me, communicate with me on LinkedIn. I'll include a link here in the blog post as well, but I just want to let you know I'd love to continue the discussion and hearing more from you, and by all means here to support you in any way I can. Hope you have a very happy new year.